Guru Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Clinical Trials Guru. This is also going to go on the podcast, and this is going to be for the sites out there that are interested in questions about budgets and how sites handle payments to subjects or to study participants. So here's the question. Let me just get into it. I always try to tune into your live streams. If you ever take discussions, I would love to hear your insight on subject stipends and the surrounding issues / pain points. And where Chris Sauber is, you can see him there. You can see him there. Uh, we have Latinos in Clinical Research. We're actually meeting with Greenfire for Latinos in Clinical Research. They actually specialize in this pain point, and there's going to be a live stream with Latinos in Clinical Research and Greenfire kind of talking about these things. But Chris and I will go a little in depth on it now for this channel. So I'd be curious to know how other sites handle the following. Do they pay? So let's just go bullet by bullet.
Sure.
Do they pay by cash, card, or check? Do
Well,
sites
that
pay by cash, card, or check?
I will acknowledge that is the three options.
Yes.
Now, that being said, what makes sense for you? It could be any of those three. It just depends on your specific situation. So if you're going to use cards, that's by far the most expensive route, by far. Especially if you're using like rechargeable cards, such as say Greenfire, where the cards are reloadable. That's very expensive. Well, the last time I checked, it was very expensive. Prices probably have come down since, because I checked on this maybe 2-3 years ago. But it was costly then. It just didn't make sense to me to use me personally for the sites Dan and I own. It just did not make sense to use that service. Now checks, and Dan, whether he wants to share it or
But do
not,
the
I don't know.
sponsors not pay for the reimbursement for the card?
So some sponsors do, but many don't. I would say 10% do. Now, well, let me rephrase that. So in my particular situation where I'm dealing with a lot of budgets and contracts, typically it's sponsors that are just providing this service to all sites. I've never made the request, hey, the site wants to use Greenfire. Will you reimburse this cost? I've never made that request. No site's ever asked me to make that request, so I haven't made that request. So I'm sure some sponsors would pay for this. I'm sure some wouldn't as well. So when I say 10%, I mean just 10% of sponsors are just offering this across the board to all sites participating on the trial. We're going to use Greenfire, so this is how you're paying the patients, right? So 90% don't. Of those 90%, maybe you get another 20-25% to reimburse you if you want to use Greenfire to pay your patients. So you could go that route. I mean, I'm sure that's a possibility. Again, I've never made that request, so I don't know if they would for sure, but I assume many would. And it might even be higher than 25%. So that being said, though, checks are another good option. You have documented proof for the IRS of you're making these payments to individuals, but those checks also have their own kind of pain points as well. And I don't know if Dan wants to share. He's had a problem with this. You've had patients also the amount, right?
Well, there's several problems with check. One of them is there could be check fraud, and we have had a few instances where the check get in the wrong hand, and it's very easy to forge these checks once they have it, and they can just go to a check cashing place and put in the amount, and there's different computer programs where they can just like basically fraudulently create a new check. And so I tend to stay away from that. I do like Greenfire as an option, but like Chris said, it does get costly. So you would have to have, I guess, a lot of studies for that to make sense, or a lot of patients for that to make sense, and it would just become part of your overhead cost as a site if you can't get it reimbursed by sponsor. I think those costs are coming down because of vendors like Greenfire. I mean, we're going to be doing a live stream with them next week. I'm sure it's going to come up. Um, check. There's other issues too. A lot of the patients lose their Medicare eligibility if sites issue the patients a 1099, which they shouldn't, because in my opinion, and I guess everybody has different opinions here, in my opinion, the patients are in a study. You're not, as a site, you don't want them to lose eligibility benefits because of your study.
So,
So we eat the tax bill for those patients instead of issuing them a 1099s. I think that's how we do it with our accountant as far as our bookkeeping, but not every site is that generous and that nice and that empathetic. There's a lot of sites that could care less, unfortunately,
so
and they
just,
don't even tell the patients, and then they join a study and their Medicare eligibility gets burned.
well, they got to fill out a 1099, so they should have some knowledge of what's going on. But yeah, you're right. Probably many don't. But that being said, so in our situation, our CPA always tells us to get 1099s from these individuals. Um, I'm no tax specialist and not a tax attorney, so just don't take my word on this. You have to check with your own legal authorities. But our CPA still files the dollars that are paid out. He just files it, I think, as like a miscellaneous expense. Um, but he says for sure, if you were to get audited doing this, that you're going to wind up having to eat those costs, right? If you
Right.
can't show proof of what you're spending this on. But so far, knock on wood, Dan and I have been lucky. We've never been audited. But Dan's right. You probably don't want to assign 1099s to your patients.
Yeah, because if most patients who are on Medicare thought that okay, their participation is going to reduce or take away their Medicare eligibility, they're not going to do the study.
Right,
Like 90% of them, if not
right.
100% of them, are in that camp. So I'm not sure how the Greenfire works with the card. Uh, cash, this is not a problem, although you
Okay.
have to account for the money somehow. It boils down to, does the patient pay the tax or does the site pay the tax on it? And I've always gone the route of the site just paying the tax on it.
And so the last option being cash, paying your patients with cash, I think is the simplest route. Now you have to trust whoever's handling the cash, right? So if you have, coordinators that are handing out the cash and they're all, many different coordinators and you don't necessarily trust them all. I don't know how, if you want them, depending again on how busy your site is, maybe you're handing them over a couple $1,000s in cash. Um, and who's to say they're not skimming off 100 here and 100 there or something. So you
Right.
have to trust the person that's handling the cash. I would say that's in my opinion, that's the biggest downfall of using cash is
Yeah.
just trust.
We should have probably had our CPA come on the Zoom to tell us, because like you said, we've done this for years. We've never burned a patient's Medicare eligibility, and we've never had issues with the IRS, probably because of how he's categorizing the income. I don't think we write it all off. I think we eat a lot of it, because I think we had to explain to him what's happening, and then he figured out a way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
that's actually
possible.
that's the next question. I mean, I remember having this conversation with our accountant. This is the same guy we're using back
Mm-hmm.
in 2006 for the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I had to educate him what's research. This is how we pay patients, but we don't want them to burn their eligibility. How do we burden the tax responsibility to the IRS could care less. They just want their money.
Yep.
They don't care if it's from you or from the patient. And so, as a site, I think it's in your best interest to have this conversation with your accountant and tell them, look, our patients are important to us. Last thing we want to do is reduce or take away their Medicare eligibility. So, how do we categorize these payments as something that maybe we can't write off? And I think that's the conversation I had with our accountant, and I think he's figured out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're no tax attorneys. Uh, and so definitely you need to have a CPA and a bookkeeper that knows what they're doing and knows how to classify this. And don't be greedy. Don't just like take the tax bill for yourself, right? You can't write off everything. I mean, there's plenty you're going to write off, but when it comes to patient payments, try to write those off. And that's their next question, actually. So, what is done when a subject doesn't want to earn over 600 because of tax concerns? Do sites break up the payment over 2 calendar years? That's another option too, right? So I've had this, like I said, I've had this conversation with our CPA. He's educated on clinical research now, and we haven't had an issue so far. Because I don't think we write that off.
So see, I would disagree with you. I'm sure we do. I've had a couple of conversations with our attorney, our CPA.
Yeah,
And I mean, like the question there, right? Because you get 600 written off, period, right? Whether it's
right,
the patient or your company,
right,
you don't have to have any for the miscellaneous expense up to
right,
600.
right,
So I'm almost certain he categorizes all of them as patients, because we show cash deductions from the account to pay the patients, right?
right.
We take out lump sums. And he knows, because I've told him before, if it's this dollar amount, it's for patient payments, right?
Okay, okay.
Any other cash that's withdrawn is for something else. It's just this one particular dollar amount. So he knows that.
So he puts it in a category, some category,
Yeah, yeah,
but probably because we haven't had issue with the IRS in 15 years, so it's probably some category where we are paying our fair share.
maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you for sure,
yeah.
but it wouldn't make sense for us to pay taxes on all of what we're using to pay patients when 600 per patient is you're able to write off.
There you go. Yeah. So I think that's what he does, and then anything
But
after
he would
that.
have to know how many patients we're seeing, and he doesn't.
I see what you're saying. But he does do the monthly bookkeeping.
Yeah, but that still
It
doesn't
still
tell him how
doesn't
many
tell him.
patients.
Yeah, because we use cash.
Right.
I see. So yeah, this is complicated. This is a complicated issue. I think Greenfire resolves this in a way, but I don't know. And maybe that's a good topic for Greenfire next week when we go with Latinos in clinical research. How do we handle subject taxation and Medicare eligibility or Social Security disability income? A lot of these patients are dependent on SSI. And if you're making over a certain amount, your SSI benefits get reduced too.
And I'm trying to remember, and I just can't recall. It's been a while since I've used Greenfire. If they make the patients sign a 1099, I don't think they do, but maybe they do.
I think that's a site thing. That's a site decision for the
But if
1099.
but if Greenfire's handling, so I guess this is just
And
another
it wouldn't,
open-ended
and
question.
clinical research would like need its own IRS category because it's not like the patients are independent contractors. You're not
Right.
hiring them to
Right.
do a job, right? They're doing a study.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So maybe that's why the IRS leaves that alone. They're like, these are not independent contractors, they're patients.
Yeah.
As
Maybe.
long as they're getting their taxes. And by the way, sites, you're getting money that you're paying the patients. It's in your budget, so the sponsor is already reimbursing you
For what
for
you're
what
paying
you're
the
paying the
patients.
patients. So
Mhm.
it should just be taxable income, as far as I'm concerned. I've
Mm.
even had this conversation with our CPA. I know I've had it before you joined. I've had this conversation with him
Sure.
like 3 times,
Sure.
and he said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." And that's the last I've heard of it.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Have a good CPA and really like educate them. Like take a few hours, educate them on clinical research. Uh,
Probably the best route, now since we're just really kicking this ball around, probably the best route to go for your new company is, like Dan says, educate your CPA. And at the end of the year, so that your patients are not paying the taxes, but do send your CPA how many patients did we have for this year, right? So if you
hmm,
saw, say, 20 patients for the year, just to keep math simple, that means you get 600 times 20, right?
right.
So you would get, what is that, $12,000 in write-offs
Hmm, hmm.
that you don't have to pay the taxes on your revenue,
See,
right?
maybe having a system like Greenfire is worth the money because everything's documented and you just send them that. You
Sure.
just send the CPA that,
Yeah,
and they can do
maybe.
the math.
Yeah, maybe.
They can write up to 600 per patient, and then the rest the site can eat the bill.
Yep.
Because like I said, the IRS could care less who it's coming from.
Mhm.
And patients are not independent contractors, so a 1099 technically is what you're supposed to issue them. But if you really look at it, and if I would bet you the IRB does not consider patients independent contractors, they're study participants. They're not employed by your site.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with patient safety, so I doubt they care about that. I mean, that's more up to the government.
Well, that's the next question. You're right. It would be the Office of Human Research Protection, OHRP, which is basically run by the FDA. But the OHRP oversees IRBs.
Mhm.
That's the next question, actually. Does the site notify the IRB if subject declines payment, or does a simple note of subject declining on the ICF with subject signature date suffice? I don't think we've ever had a subject decline a payment. Have we?
Not that I can recall. That'd be very unusual.
I've had patients. First of all, I like to call them patients, not subjects. But I've had patients tell me they're not doing it for the money and they don't expect to get paid. But when you give them money, they say thank you.
Yeah, I've had
That's-
that happen too many times.
Yeah. So does the site notify the IRB if the subject declines payment? In keeping it consistent with Alcoa-C, I would say document it.
That's
Because
exactly what I would say too.
there are some sponsors that will look at logs and make sure that the sites are paying patients.
Mhm.
So have it documented. Any discrepancy from that, any deviation from that should be documented. Does the site, okay, do any sites push back to sponsors to send the 1099 when it can be argued the sponsor pays the stipend? See, these are all things we've already discussed. Do any sites push back to the sponsor to send the 1099? So,
How would the sponsor do that? They don't even know the
yeah,
patient's name.
so what they're saying is because some sponsors or CROs send the sites a 1099 at the end of every year.
Yeah, they all do. Well, they're all supposed
Those
to.
they're all supposed to. They don't all do. So maybe I'm interpreting this question as sites pushing back to the sponsors sending the 1099. I don't understand the question. Like I said, most, and especially if Chris is negotiating your budgets, if you're a client of ours, which you might benefit from being a client of ours with these kind of questions. Um, the sponsors are already paying you for your patient payments. So
Mhm.
that's not a true expense of yours. It's a pass-through cost. You're getting paid for it.
Mhm.
So theoretically, the site should pay tax on that, right?
But
And
but
like Chris said, it's a nuance because it's up to $600 that savvy sites can deduct per patient.
but the person asking the question is right, because what goes into that the W-9 at the end of the year, right, includes those patient stipends, right? It's the total amount paid out to the site, including the stipends. So yeah, you are
Yeah.
getting taxed on it.
Yeah.
So, but it's, if you follow the steps that we've outlined previously, you can avoid some of that tax.
Right.
And if your question is, can the sponsor issue 1099s to patients? No. The answer is
No,
no.
they can't. Are there times when a W-9 isn't required when the subject earns greater than 600 in a calendar year, like travel reimbursement versus a stipend payment?
I mean, I think that all falls into the same. It's all lump sum together, I believe.
Right. That's the thing. The IRS tax code is not customized for clinical research.
Right.
Um, and I think the biggest differentiator is patients are not, and this is very easy to prove if you were ever to get audited, which is probably why the IRS doesn't touch this. There's bigger fish to fry and easier fish to fry.
Hmm.
You can easily prove a patient is not a contractor. Very easily. You show them the informed consent. That should end it. This is
Hmm.
not, you're not employed by the site.
Right.
So that's a gray area. And like I said, the way we've handled it, me over the last 16 years and Chris over the last 12 or so, is the way we've just explained it with professional guidance. We're not just doing this on our own. And our CPA is really good. He knows the tax code, like he's probably memorized the tax code. So don't attempt to do this on your own, is what I'm trying to say.
So Dan, that's very much hyperbole. Have you seen the tax code books? They stack like 10 feet high.
I know he's probably memorized it.
No,
He's a very good CPA. He's been doing this for like
sure,
30 years.
sure, but no CPA has the tax code memorized. This is ridiculous.
That'd be like having GCP memorized.
No, it's worse than that.
Okay, a little bit of hyperbole. Don't attempt to do it on your own if you're a site. Have a
Absolutely.
CPA, have a bookkeeper, even have a tax attorney. We have all of the above. What if how do sites address subjects' confidentiality concerns when they have to fill out the W-9? See, this is why I don't have them do this unless it's a lot of money, like for inpatient studies. I think that's the only time we've done that, and even then, it's study by study. I default to not giving W-9s to our patients.
Well, and there's a significant reason behind this, right? At least in my opinion. A lot of patients may choose not to participate if you're going to make them fill that out. So which do you
Exactly.
prefer, having the patient or having to pay the tax on the patient?
Thank you. That's exactly sums it up well. This is exact. We've had these issues.
Yep.
Patients are like, "No, I'm not filling this out," and they're right. They're not. Again, they're not contractors. They're not. They're patients. They're in a clinical trial. They're reimbursed for their time. They're not getting compensated.
And it makes more sense to have the patient and pay the tax on the patient than not having
That's
either.
right. That's right. That's right. But with a good CPA, you can still maximize your deductions, like you were saying, up to 600 per patient.
Right.
And then the difference of what they make versus what you've deducted, you then have to pay the tax on it as a site.
Yep.
That's the best way to alleviate this. What if the subject is anticipated to earn more than 600 in the calendar year, but does not have a social security number? Does the site have a SOP, or is this issue discussed with the IRB? So again, just don't have them fill out a W-9.
Doesn't everybody have a social security number now? I mean, other than, illegal aliens?
I'm not sure.
I think you have to
I
get one at birth now.
right. I
Okay.
think this. I don't know about green card if they have social security or like
Yeah.
legal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe it's just the illegal immigrants, and I guess this person's saying that's not the site's concern, and I mean I would tend to agree. Look, at the end of the day, you want the patient. I mean, the sponsors do typically ask for some kind of identifying info that the site keeps on the patient to confirm that they are who they say they are. But usually an ID or something would suffice. An address and a date of birth and a name. So yeah, this is again like a W-9 issue. How is accountability done to protect the site from potential fraud? So easiest way to protect you from fraud is don't issue checks. I've had a really bad experiences a few times. The bank does give you your money back, but the police will do nothing. And there's really no recourse other than the bank giving you your money back. They do reimburse you for fraud. But you do have to, it's a lot of pain. Like you got to go fill out a police report. The bank will give you your money back immediately if there's been check fraud. And this has happened to me 4 times. This is how it worked. I noticed, oh wow, I didn't pay $7,000 to this patient, and it's always a name that I don't know who it is. They don't use their own name on these fake checks.
So how to get it cashed? I mean,
They go
check
to a check cashing place.
and they'll cash checks. I've never been to one. They'll cash checks without ID.
They have an ID. It's probably fake.
Huh. Okay. Interesting.
They just check the name, and the check cashing place could care less because they get their vig,
Sure. Sure.
and then the
They get-
bank covers it when it's fraud. So this is exactly how it works, but it's not. This is still like a pain for the site owner or the site director.
Time consuming.
Yeah, you notice, hopefully relatively quickly, usually within a week, I've noticed that there's a odd charge on a check. I click on the image of the check. I immediately recognize it's not one of our checks, but it has our account number and our routing number. It looks like one of our checks, but it's not one of our checks. And I can't recognize the name. And so then I call the bank. You got to wait half an hour. They tell you, okay, this is fraud. We're gonna put a stop on this check. Sometimes they will make you open a new account,
Hmm.
which is even more of a pain. Other times they'll make you open a new account and go submit a police report. They've always reimbursed the money the same day, but they insist on the police report, and sometimes they insist on changing the bank account. That's a
So,
lot of work if this continues to happen, and this is why we've completely eliminated checks. I'm either for cash or green fire.
so I want to elaborate on that, having to close your account, how much of a hassle that would be.
Extreme hassle.
I don't think you're conveying how much of a hassle this is, especially now. So let's say you have
I'm
10
not, because
studies.
it's been years since I've actually been involved in that aspect, but you're involved in it now.
So let's say you have 10 studies. At best, 10% of all studies now pay by check. The vast majority, 90%, I would say, maybe 80 to 90% now pay electronically. So if you got to close your account, you got to notify every sponsor that account is closed. And then you got to fill out a new form to make sure that they get paid to the new account, right? With all the account information. And then, as we both know, once something's in the sponsor's system, usually they still just try to pay that whatever was there previously. They don't update their systems.
Right.
So you're going to have all kinds of money issues if you got to
Yeah.
close that account. It's
Yeah.
just going to be a beyond belief hassle. If you have to notify 10 sponsors, hey, don't pay that account, pay this account, then they're all still going to pay that old account.
Yeah, I
Oh
mean,
my God, that would be a nightmare.
thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly what happened. I've only been asked to change my account once. I told you guys at least
But
3 or 4 times I've had check fraud, and I think only once I had to change the account.
but back then, because I would assume that's many years ago, 2007, 2006.
2013 was the time I had to change my account.
Oh, so back then there was still quite a few, or I would even say probably majority were paying by check, not electronically. So you probably had some that were electronic and
Half.
some
It was
check.
like
Yeah.
half.
So less of a hassle than it is now. I'm telling you, everybody's electronic now.
Yeah, I know. I know.
It would just be a hassle, a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're sending it to the wrong bank. That account doesn't
Your old account.
exist.
Yeah.
They're sending it to your old account. Nobody's in charge of that old account, doesn't exist anymore, but the sponsor listed as paid.
Yep.
It's such a pain. I highly recommend not using check to pay patients.
Hmm.
I know it's convenient with the e-check that you can just print out from QuickBooks or from your bank. Stay away from it. I think that pain alone is worth me paying Greenfire if I don't want to use cash.
Hmm.
That's really one of the two options I would have after everything I've been through and what Chris. I mean, I can't imagine going through that again.
Yeah, I mean, with our clients, because this is a common question with the clients, I in order recommend cash, then some sort of system like Greenfire. There's many of them out there. Just whichever
Yeah.
one's the cheapest is what I would use. But
Yeah.
I'm sure they're still relatively expensive. It's the cheapest route option is cash, without a doubt. Cash, Greenfire, then check. Just avoid checks if you can.
Yeah. So that's it. They're a director of a small research site, and this is kind of some of the questions they had. So would love to have you as a client. I'm gonna send you this link to this video made especially for you. But I'm sure the beauty of these questions is it's never just for this person. This
Oh
is
no,
probably hundreds of people asking the same thing. And as you can
sure.
tell, we don't even have the answer. We just have best practices that have worked for us. It's anecdotes
Hmm.
combined with tax professionals and CPAs.
Yeah, checks might work great for some people. Just I would rather avoid any potential nightmare. The biggest drawback again to cash, in my opinion, is just you have to trust the people handling it.
Yeah. Petty cash, I think that's another miscellaneous expense that the CPA uses is petty cash.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you're a busy site, that petty cash becomes significant. So at some
Oh yeah.
point, to not attract the attention of the IRS, you do have to pay on a lot of that cash. That's been my strategy. That's
the
been my strategy.
taxes.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's why we haven't had a problem with the IRS.
Yep.
So that's it. That's it, guys. That's basically in a nutshell. But I had to bring Chris on because I used to handle these kind of things around 2013. Chris really started handling more of these things, if
Mhm.
not all of these things. But we both know it's just I'm more from the past and Chris is present with it. But the issues don't really change. They're the
Yeah.
same issues.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chris. I appreciate it, and thank you for the viewer and the listener for asking the questions, and hopefully it helps someone else out there. And I've got to get back to work, but I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, guys. Bye bye.